My name is Ivo Welch. I come from a little town named Schweinfurt. We were the only Jews in an environment of about 150,000 people. My father was a concentration camp survivor. After the war, he was from Poland originally, went to the United States for 5 years, came back to Germany, and of course, because he had no education, he survived Auschwitz, had to become an entrepreneur. So for the most part, we had no academic background in my family. My mother comes from a family of 7 children. Her parents are both deaf mutes, so she was a child of deaf adults, just like the Oscar movie at the moment, and had no parental supervision either. Of course, my father was relatively strict. He was born in 1923, and whatever I think I may accomplish in my life will never get close to what he accomplished in his life. He may not have any academic education, but he managed to maintain being a human being throughout his entire concentration camp experience. In fact, it was very common for people who would meet him on the street to ask, for example, his brother when he was with him, "Who's the person next to you?" And would say, "Well, this is my brother Aaron." And Aaron Wilczkowski, "Oh, you saved my family in this and this circumstance." One of the stories of my father is he was very short. He was 1.60 meters tall. And when the Germans evacuated the Lodz ghetto, he had the choice of staying there because he was an auxiliary policeman who helped. But because his mother and sister were evacuated, he decided to go with them. And he had a pretty good idea that that was not good news. And he was in this cattle car with like 80 people that were all fit into this very, very tight space. I think it was 80, some very high number. Usually what happened, they were so tight from one another, some people would suffocate. And there were these breathing holes, and usually a bully or two would occupy the area next to the breathing hole, and the people in the back would not get oxygen and die. So what he decided to do was, I'm going to cure this. He's 1.60 meters tall. He would go right next to them, wait until the first person fell asleep, and hit them over the head with a stone. They would wake up and would scream, "Who in the world was this?" Whatever. But it's dark, there are many people, there's not much that they can do. They would fall asleep again, he would do the same thing again. They relinquished the air hole. And what my father did afterwards is he actually had people circulate in the cattle car so that everybody would get oxygen for a while, so that nobody would suffocate. And he said when he came to Auschwitz, they opened the cattle car. The SS men came by and they said, "Where are the dead people of this cattle car?" They'd never seen a cattle car without any dead people. So my father managed to do that, save everybody. Typically when there was things to be divided, food, other things, my father was the one that everybody trusted. He really had a very good sense of fairness, and he remained a human being, a mensch. So he was, in that case, a absolutely lovely human being. He also managed to have quite a temper, so even though he was only 1.60 meters tall, everybody was afraid of him. Which he had natural authority, natural charisma. And I wish I had inherited more of this. I guess I haven't. Certainly not as intimidating as my father is, even though I'm quite a bit taller. But that was sort of the upbringing. We were a very tight family. As I said, we were the only Jewish family. I had many wonderful German friends, still consider them wonderful. My mother also is German-born, was not Jewish. And it was a great upbringing, but not one where you would be academically very ambitious. So that is something that just randomly developed afterwards. My father wanted me to study in the United States because he had seen that before the war, lots of the Jews that knew it was bad news, what was coming, refused to leave Poland because they thought that they could just wait it out. They had all their businesses there, all their lives there, they had never lived anywhere else. My father wanted me to have an experience somewhere else. So he said that he would pay for education for me wherever I wanted to go. I got accepted into Columbia at the time, which was very, very rare at that time for a German to apply to. My parents paid for the tuition. Tuition in Germany was free, so it was very unusual. and I studied there for 3 years. Then I decided I needed to get more of a graduate degree for name because I wanted to go back to Germany and become an entrepreneur. And in Germany, having an academic title is the equivalent of being the new aristocracy. I'm not going to be a von Welch, so the closest that I can be is a Dr. Welch or an MBA Welch. So I decided it would be nice to have a doctor title, and I applied for a PhD without having any idea of what I was going to get myself into. At Columbia, I was still always at the top of my class without trying. I get to Chicago, where I eventually got my PhD, and all of a sudden I'm in the middle of my class, or actually in the bottom third of my class. And I find myself in this environment, and suddenly I have to learn how to survive. And it was a very humbling experience, but it was also a wonderful experience, and I learned a lot. And when it came to solving new problems, this was where I shone. So I could figure out eventually how to find new problems and find interesting answers to them. That's how I eventually fell into writing a PhD thesis. And then suddenly I realized maybe academia is not such a bad profession after all, and maybe I don't need to go back to Germany in order to become an entrepreneur. Maybe I want to try this academia thing. Math is a tool for me. It is not a purpose in itself. That makes me somewhat different from many other economists for whom the tools are purposes in themselves. They want to develop the tools for others to use. I am not an economist like that. I'm mostly driven by particular problems, finding answers, and then finding the best tools to express this. Many times referees and editors will be somewhat dismayed by how low level and how conversational I write my papers. But that is intentional because my ideas typically tend to be very simple, and the highest praise that you can give any of my papers is that they feel like Columbus' egg. Once I tell you, it seems totally natural, and you wonder why it wasn't obvious before. You wonder why other people haven't found it. And so one of my biggest challenges in teaching has always been, how do I get people to use their common sense and think about the problems rather than thinking about just studying solutions? And I think that goes through all my teaching, whether I teach my children in high school, whether I teach college students, whether I teach MBA students or PhD students, or whether I give a seminar to other faculty. And if you read my textbook, for example, I think you will very strongly hear my voice in them. In fact, everybody who reads my textbook says, when I read your sentences, I can hear you talk. And I talk to my audience the same way that I talk to my kids, the same way I talk to you, whether you're listening now on the internet or whether it's you sitting across from me. I don't make many distinctions, many differences between them. I think the ideas are fairly simple. I don't think there is that much difference between a high school student who is self-studying and a PhD student who is in their third year of finance, having studied this for many, many years in terms of how to understand and approach new problems. I think the ideas, the basic ideas, are all very simple. And I tell all of my PhD students, even those that are really good at math and they can solve all the differential equations you can throw at them in the world, even them I tell, please go back, read the basic examples in the book and get an overall idea of what the logic of all this is in finance. A high school student who can deal with physics, who can take a physics class or a chemistry class, surely could pick up my book and learn finance just as well. It's not harder than that. There are some people for whom this is probably not a great subject, but those people wouldn't enjoy physics either. So for the set of people that can do basic calculus, can do a basic physics course just with algebra, not even with calculus, those kinds of people can also read my finance book and understand basic finance. I chose a zero price for my textbook because my goal and intent is to convey the ideas and information to as many students as possible. I do not need to earn money from that. If I wanted to earn money, there's a lot of other things that I could do. It's almost silly for me to try and make money off of my textbook when all I want is to convey the ideas. I believe science by nature has to be skeptical. When somebody says something, you want to doubt it. This is not religion, this is not belief, this is not polite conversation, in which case you don't want to offend anybody. This is science. You do want to offend other people. You do want to overthrow old theories. You want to tell old people like me, and I'm old at this point, that what they have written is wrong. And clearly, I will not be very happy when somebody writes that about me, although I hope that I will be more open-minded when it will happen to me. And they should write this. This is what science should be all about. I hope they will not make it personal, but if they think a paper of mine is wrong, they should write that a paper of mine is wrong. And they should say so in a seminar if they think that is wrong. And they should try and do so in the most polite way possible, but also in a very direct way that leaves no doubt that what I would have written was wrong. And that's where I hope to have pushed the profession, the economics profession, to. It has been fun. It is incredibly intellectually rewarding. I meet young people, I meet new people, I meet interesting people. I have fun, interesting colleagues. I have the luxury of saying no when I consider something unethical. I am not out to make a whole lot of money. I can live very comfortably on the salary that I earn from UCLA. And it's a fantastic job. It's a fantastic career. It can be miserable for somebody if your papers do not get published. For me, it was just very, very lucky, and I'm very blessed, and I'm very grateful that it happened. And I don't take it for granted. Life has been really wonderful to me. I have about, 20, 30 good years left on this earth, and I want to do things that I find interesting and rewarding, and that leave the world a better place. Do things that are fun and interesting and help other people. That's it. I can do that. I'll be very happy. I will die a very happy person.